With Metroid Other M due out in the next week or so, this is the first 2D classic-style Metroid game that doesn't have a name Prime attached to it in about 8 years. So I thought it would be worth going back through the history of the Metroid series, the games that are direct antecedents to Metroid Other M.
The challenge is Metroid. The power is Nintendo. Defend the planet Zephus against
the original Metroid was actually kind of a revelation when it came out in 1986.
You know, I don't even think I gave a crap about Metroid at first.
First Metroid, embarrassing admission to have to make, right over my head.
It wasn't until many, many years later that I was actually able to understand the story.
I was pretty much only used to like platformers at the time anyway.
Super Mario Brothers had come out to say, hey look, it's possible to play an action game and move from left to right. And then Metroid came and said, oh yeah, you can move from left to right, but you can also move from right to left, and you can go up and down, and you can backtrack, and you can find invisible wall spots to bomb.
Wow, this is a really fun game where I'm running around and killing things in a different way than what I was used to for most Nintendo games.
But anyway, I did enjoy, you know, the exploration for sure, just the freeform stuff.
And I think the big reveal at the end of the game was interesting, but also, you know, well, maybe it's just a surfer dude who looks great in a bikini.
That was another one of those things that seemed like a rumor, but then you could actually, if you were good enough, you could pull it off. Turns out, she's a pretty tough chick, because that bikini was just as tough with dealing with lava as the big heavy suit of armor.
Metroid 2, I know, it's supposed to be the worst one. Everybody hates Metroid 2 and all that, but you know, I loved it.
Metroid 2 doesn't get enough love.
Metroid 2 is kind of the odd duck in the Metroid series.
Metroid 2, on the other hand, a huge step down in technology.
It was actually technologically a step backward going from the NES to the Game Boy.
But interestingly, the character is actually established so much better because she's fucking huge.
It's also kind of an interesting and unique chapter of the Metroid series because you see more of the Metroids that give the series its name.
And the storyline was interesting in the fact that, you know, maybe Metroids aren't all bad.
You know, a lot of the things that were introduced in Metroid 2 carried over to the rest of the series, so it was kind of, I don't want to say groundbreaking, but it did set a lot of precedents in that way.
Also, lava. Fuck lava. Now it gets good.
Super Metroid is considered by a lot of people to be the greatest game of all time.
Super Metroid is up there with being one of my favorite games of all time.
I just felt weird about being excited for it. It was like, I felt like I should be hyped for it, but it didn't really pan out that way.
And it tells a story for the first time. I mean, the first one was just like, hey, there are aliens, and something about Metroids.
All of which plays out without any dialogue or narrative whatsoever. It's all built into the game.
You're seeing these stories described just entirely through pantomime, practically.
It has a really great sense of progression, great graphics, amazing atmosphere, especially for a 16-bit game.
We're able to do so much with the environments in that game and how they make you feel.
You know, just huge environments to punk around in. But also, even the music started off very lonely and creepy. And by the end, though, it's really building, you know, and gorgeous.
The impact of that game in 1994 was fantastic. It was tremendous. And the game really holds up still, even to this point.
It is pretty good.
I always feel really bad for Metroid Fusion. It tends to be regarded as a black sheep just as much as Metroid 2.
Metroid Fusion was the long-awaited, as in 8 years, sequel to Super Metroid. And I think a lot of people were disappointed by it just because they had such high expectations. And the result that they got was a really, in a lot of ways, a great game, but also a very different game.
You have a chatty bitch of a computer who's locking doors behind you.
Warning, no entry without authorization.
And you're getting reams of exposition and tedious text every time you get in an elevator.
That was what's so great about Super Metroid, is that there didn't need to be a lot of dialogue. It was just kind of you trapped in this huge, expanding underground world.
If you could chop all that out, it's a really solid game.
One of the most memorable parts of the game was the SAX enemy, which was actually an evil doppelganger of Samus, basically, that had all of the powers that Samus had at the end of Super Metroid.
That final fight is really great.
The process of playing through Metroid Fusion, in a lot of ways, is basically re-empowering Samus to the state that you were in at the end of Super Metroid. Despite some of the quirks and some of the controversial elements to the game, it really is a strongly designed game. In a lot of ways, I think Metroid Zero Mission is probably the best of the Metroid games.
Zero Mission is probably my favorite Metroid game, believe it or not, just because it was a really honed version of Metroid 1.
Zero Mission I am grateful for just because I never really got through the original Metroid.
Metroid Zero Mission was not actually a new or original game. It was a remake of the original Metroid.
They brought all the improvements over from Fusion and they just made this really concise, really slick version of Metroid 1.
It was a great way of repackaging that story and actually adding some story to it without making it expository.
It brings in all the refinements, all the improvements, all the things that the Metroid core team had learned over the years, and folds those back into the creation that started the entire series. And there's even kind of an Easter egg at the end, not really an Easter egg, but sort of a reference to the way you could play through the original in just a swimsuit in a sort of added-on stealth sequence that some people don't like, but I think is kind of a nice, creative way to touch back on that original secret to the game.
I think it was kind of the beginning of the objectification of Samus. You can watch her tits swell over the last, couple Smash Brothers games and whatnot she's appeared in. It's getting a little creepy.